And those things are crucial. And for me, like getting sober when I was 20, like recovery had to become a lifestyle for me, right? Like it had to be something that I really could truly see myself living out each day. And for the young men coming into our program, like recovery happens in our therapeutic groups. And recovery happens in individual therapy. Growth happens in those ways. Like those things are crucial to the therapeutic process. But where I see guys engage the most is when I see like 20 of them running around on the softball field, smiling and laughing and having fun. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't remember the last time I laughed or smiled or had fun. You know what I mean? And when I was in treatment, like coming alive again in that way and experiencing stuff like that helped me see that, like, hey, this is something, man, that I might not hate.
Good afternoon. My name is Graham Durgee, and I'm the founder and CEO of New Waters Recovery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to our weekly podcast, Finding New Waters. Our goal in creating Finding New Waters is to provide a resource for families to help navigate the complexities of supporting a loved one struggling with substance use or mental health. When we find ourselves in crisis due to one of these issues, most people have no idea where to turn. We hope to shed some light onto what is often the darkest hour for many families.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Finding New Waters. I'm Ryan Gerald, Continuing Care Coordinator. I'm sitting here with Justin McClendon, our Executive Director, and we have the privilege of talking to Jared Murray, works in admissions and outreach at Momentum Recovery. Jared, welcome to Finding New Waters.
Absolutely, guys. Happy to be here. Excited to be on here with y'all.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Yeah. This is really nice. Jared, I know that we work together. We work together regularly, and it's a really wonderful experience to be able to work with young men and get them kind of engaged on a path that I know personally, I think Justin knows personally, and you do as well. And I was really hoping that you would open up and talk a little bit about how you found yourself in the industry and maybe how you found yourself in recovery yourself.
Yeah, totally. I guess a little bit of background on me. I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, so born and raised in Alabama. I was hoping we would get on this podcast and just talk about Alabama football for an hour, but that's okay. We can talk about recovery instead. But yeah, man, I guess like a little bit about my story, a little bit of backstory, I guess, for me. Like I grew up in a good family, had an older brother who I looked up to, had loving parents who poured unconditional love into me. I had everything you could have ever asked for growing up. Of course, my family system had its own stuff in it, like every family system does. But somewhere along the way, through my experiences growing up, like I did develop a negative belief system about myself, and like I was an athlete. I thrived in sports. I did well academically. I did well in social groups. I could put on whatever mask I needed to put on to fit in with whatever group I needed to fit in with. However, I never fully felt comfortable with myself. I never felt fully okay with me. There was always that kind of emptiness and that internal void, that fear of not being good enough, fear of being alone, fear of failure, fear of success. Like I always struggled with that level of self-centered fear that we talk about in recovery a lot. And as far back as I can remember, I've always kind of felt that way. And so I recall like the first time I ever tried any substances, I was probably about 13 years old. And it was like all that fear went away, all that insecurity went away. I felt like I could be who I wanted to be. I felt like I could be who others wanted me to be. I'm someone who really likes connection from others. I like acceptance from others. I like approval from others. And I seem to be able to find all those things through the lifestyle of using drugs, and I found that out early on. When I was really young. And so my addiction really started at a young age. When I went into high school was when it really kind of started to really progress. That was when I was introduced to opiates and benzos and cocaine and certain substances like that I really struggled with. And so I got in a lot of legal trouble in high school, got arrested quite a bit, skipping school, getting high before school, during school, after school. My disease continued to progress throughout the later years of high school for me. And then I left Huntsville and went down to the University of Alabama, which was a phenomenal idea for the substance abuse problem I had coming out of high school. My parents, I talked to them about that decision, and they were like, man, we were so ready for you to get out of our house. I think some denial on their part is that they did think that I would just somehow go to college and grow up and these things would just figure themselves out, but they desperately wanted me out of their house because of the unmanageability that was going on as a result of my addiction when I was living at home. So I went down to Alabama, basically got heavily addicted to Oxycontin down there, and cocaine. Those are my two kind of constants. Was an IV drug user eventually and got into some pretty big legal trouble when I was 20, which is what drove me to go into treatment. So I got arrested with, about five felonies and 2 counts of 2 misdemeanors and 1 big arrest. I was living in the fraternity house at the time, and that's kind of what pulled me out of the University of Alabama and put me in treatment. And since then, I've been completely clean and sober since then. So January 29th, 2011 was when I went to treatment, and that's my sobriety date. So went into this thing when I was 20, and man, it's been an incredible journey for almost the last 13 years.
Jared, I think it's really interesting that you kind of got springboarded. A lot of people think, in a recovery setting that the only way we can enter it is when we have a full internal collapse. We've totally surrendered to the process. We have to be fully accepting of ourselves as alcoholics. And my guess is getting busted with the heroin at the frat house, that's maybe not mentally where you were at. Was that your motivation initially? And did your motivation change over time during your treatment experience?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Ryan. I think that ties into a lot of the things that even when I get to work with young men with you on, that we try to talk to families about and guys about, is that, hey, it's okay that you're not fully surrendered to the idea that you're an addict or an alcoholic. It's okay that you don't, fully see the true severe consequences of your substance use, right? Like what we try to do in this field as interventionists, treatment centers, professionals that do this work is try to help raise the bottom for young men and try to coach their families on helping them understand that, we put the shovel down when we stop digging, right? I didn't have the rational ability to make a decision to go to treatment on my own. I had to be intervened on from that standpoint. And I remember when I was getting arrested that day, I was telling those police officers, y'all don't get it. I've been clean for 2 weeks, and what's so crazy about that is I believed that, you know what I mean? Delusional I was at that point in time in my addiction. And man, if it was left up to me, there was no way I was going to make a decision to go to treatment. Right. Deep down, I wanted something different, right? And I was miserable and I was empty and all of those things. But the light bulb of recovery and surrender did not happen for me then, right? It happened for me over the course of a long period of time.
100%. I mean, Justin, I know you have a lot of experience as a therapist.
Yeah.
Working with young people, how do people have these kind of motivation shifts and changes?
I think I think we all see it, right? And we see it at so many different levels. Everybody's so different. And I think, sometimes we get lucky and we have people, whether they're young, whether they're middle-aged, older, we have some people that, maybe they did have that light switch kind of go off for them, right? They had a horrible experience, or they just happened to wake up one day and they were just like, hey, I'm tired of living this way. And then maybe they're stepping into that process with that motivation. But I think more times than not, people simply don't, right? They're just not at that place yet, or they're not, maybe they have a little bit of motivation, or they know that they need to make a change, but they're still not at the place to where we hope that they're going to get. And as you were saying, Jared, I think, it's not a prerequisite, right? I mean, it's not required that somebody is, fully on board, or that they're fully accepting of where they're at in their life and their substance use in order to take their first step towards change. You know what I mean? And I think, Jared, I know you do too. We have these conversations on what feels like a daily basis is, we're not asking you to have that, right? We're just asking you to take one step forward right now. And with the hopes that along that path, you are going to come to believe some different things about yourself and what life needs to look like for you,
100%. I think purity of motivation, sometimes it's very difficult for parents or spouses of people that are involved in this, right? They don't just want the person to make the right action. but they wanted to make it for the right reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times the work is letting them know, like, hey, that may not be the case. That's just maybe not a realistic expectation. So one of my best friends, a real icon of mine in recovery, he got sober and chose his sponsor because his sponsor had a nice watch. He wasn't interested in like what he had to say about God, or how thorough kind of a fifth step was. Like, he saw that guy had a nice watch in sobriety, and he said, "I that's what I want." Like, and he worked with that guy for like a year.
Why not, right?
Works. And especially when you're talking about young men, I mean, sometimes it is like, listen, I see this guy and he's dating a nice girl and he's going back to school and he's in sobriety, and I never thought that would be me, know. And Jared, I think that's something that I see you when you're connecting with guys at Momentum. I think that's something that I see you trying to engage with them with. Could you talk a little bit about Momentum, the demographic that you guys serve, and what you guys specialize in?
Yeah, I can, man. So, at Momentum Recovery, first off, we're based in Wilmington, North Carolina, and we work with 18 to 35-year-old young adult men, primarily 18 to 30-year-olds. We occasionally get, guys who are 30 to 35, depending on their situation. And specializing in that age group, right? Kind of like what we're talking about. I think some of the biggest things that are so needed for the young men that we work with is they all come into our program with this negative belief system about themselves and the world around them, and what we're trying to create for them is help them develop a positive belief system about themselves and the world around them. And how we accomplish that is through helping them achieve and maintain healthy relationships and accomplish healthy relationships and establish connection with themselves and with others, and really kind of how we go about helping them accomplish those goals is through the therapeutic approaches that we do, and so when guys come to us, basically we have a full continuum of care, right, that's spread out over the course of 9 to 12 months if someone was to do our full continuum. When guys usually first initially get to us, they're going to start in our first phase, right? Like when they're coming out of New Waters, coming out of detox, they land in phase 1. And when they're in that phase of the program, they're in a 90-day, pretty intensive, structured, regimented program in that phase where their sole focus is to really kind of dig deep and do the internal work that it takes to build an appropriate foundation in their recovery without a ton of distractions that are going to keep them from doing that work. And, in working with this age group, 18 to 30-year-olds, I know for me, getting sober at 20, like I had to see that there were other young men who are my age, who are normal, who are having fun, who are cool, who I could connect with, to be able to identify, right? Like if I was in a setting where I was around guys who are way older than me with wife and kids and career and all that, like I wasn't going to connect to that as much, like I needed to be around young men who I could really relate with and identify with, because if I wasn't, I know you guys probably can relate with this. My disease is going to focus on the one difference instead of the 99 similarities, what I mean, that I have with someone. Like it's a disease of isolation. So I need to be able to find common ground with guys. And I think we do a really good job of fostering that for young men. And, what's really important, and one thing I want to highlight, like we do some really exceptional trauma work, dual diagnosis work, attachment focused work. I mean, those things are a lot of the things that we focus on. But I really love talking about like the experiential and the adventure-based stuff that we do, and when I'm talking to families, I'm like, look, like in group, Tuesday mornings and Saturday mornings for group, like they're going to be surfing or free diving or fly fishing or kayaking or paddleboarding, whatever it is that we're doing in terms of our experiential curriculum at that time. And what's important for these guys is through having those experiences, that's what allows them to engage in this work. You know what I mean? Like if we keep them in a setting where they're just staring at the same four walls every day, sitting in the same groups, hearing the same things, like they're never going to engage in this stuff, man. But we get guys outside and allow them to have these experiences that really helps them find themselves and really helps them connect to the guys around them in the program, right? And I think like doing that kind of work, man, is so therapeutic and so crucial for this age population, like it's amazing when you see a resistant 19, 20-year-old come into the program and like get out, in the water and catch a wave. Like we were on the clinical morning meeting. We were on the clinical morning meeting this week, and we had this guy come to us, and he's wanted to leave the whole first week that he's been there, because that's what happens at primary treatment, right? Like he came in resistant, and like he went out surfing with the guys, and afterwards was like, man, that was a killer experience. Like I might actually be able to enjoy it here. Like he really had an experience with recovery, in my opinion, through that. So man, I love that we do that kind of stuff.
That's huge. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of experiential recovery, or even, a lot of these like adventure-based programs and things like that. As a matter of fact, one of the podcasts we did with someone earlier today was with is it Adventure Recovery is the name of their program. Tim with Adventure Recovery. And, it just never ceases to amaze me. We talk a lot about, like learning to have fun in recovery. And like, yes, that's important. I don't want to devalue that. That is important. But there's something about, like you're saying, Jared, like that experience, that feeling of, the dopamine rush that we get from those experiences, the connectedness of being able to share those experiences with other people. I mean, it's just something deeper that I think sometimes is really difficult to find in an office clinical setting, or it takes a lot more work to maybe get to that place. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not to devalue clinical work. I mean, I'm a therapist. I think there's a lot of value there, but there's just something of essence in doing that experiential work that is just really hard to find in other places.
100%. And I think one of the things is that people don't, I think, assign it as a classical value, but adventure, exploration, those are values that people have, especially that young men have. It's the thing that they've been chasing in this substance use. And so they get to address and empower themselves in their values. I had an experience when we took the guys at Green Hill, we took them rock climbing, and we got the instructor. And at one point, a client at Green Hill was operating, was using the belay for me, myself, who was the program director at the time. And, it was pretty scary for me, right? It was a kind of terrifying experience. This guy seemed to have a real inability to do laundry, and he was responsible for my life essentially at Pilot Mountain. But it was really, really beautiful. I think what a lot of parents really struggle to see with young people in recovery, this was definitely true for me, is the complete lack of self-efficacy. I did not believe I could do anything at my core. I certainly couldn't do anything without drugs and alcohol, and that's what that escape was. And that adventure therapy builds up self-efficacy like nobody else.
It's true.
I know you guys have a lot of real specific kind of experiential options. Do you guys work with people in the Wilmington area and in the Wilmington recovery community there?
Yeah, we do, man. We have a lot of relationships with people in our recovery community and locally in Wilmington. Like on the topic of experiential work, like we have a relationship with the Wrightsville Beach Outrigger Canoeing Club, and so our guys get in these big outrigger canoes and do some outrigger canoeing around like in the bay, which is cool, man. You learn about teamwork, you learn about connecting with each other, you learn about trust and trusting the other guys to row. And there's a lot that goes into that outrigger canoe, and I got to do it with the guys when I was down there one time. And again, like we're talking about, it's really through those experiences that the connectedness happens, the self-efficacy happens. I can't say that word right like you can, Ryan, but I know what it means. But man, those things are crucial. And for me, like getting sober when I was 20, like recovery had to become a lifestyle for me, right? Like it had to be something that I really could truly see myself living out each day. And for the young men coming into our program, like recovery happens in our therapeutic groups, and recovery happens in individual therapy. Growth happens in those ways. Like those things are crucial to the therapeutic process. But where I see guys engage the most is when I see like 20 of them running around on the softball field, smiling and laughing and having fun. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't remember the last time I laughed or smiled or had fun. You know what I mean? And when I was in treatment, like coming alive again in that way and experience and stuff like that helped me see that like, hey, this is something, man, that I might not hate,
Sure.
And I don't know, for this population, for young adults, that stuff's just crucial. I can't express it enough,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things that and we've probably talked about it on this podcast before, but I think it needs to be said. I'd like to talk about length of care and the importance of that, because I think it's something that, Jared, Justin, I know people really balk at the idea. I mean, when you tell them that you have a continuum of care of 9 to 12 months, I think that really blows people's minds. And I'd really be interested in Justin, and Jared, like your point of view from clinical and someone very experienced in the recovery industry. What is the importance of that continued care and the length of time for that?
Jared, you go first, buddy.
Yeah, like since I've been working in this industry, which has been now just for about 8 years, like I've only worked at long-term programs, and that's what I'm a huge believer in. And what I love about our continuum at Momentum is we have the ability to take young men all the way from residential care to extended care, all the way to sober living. through a full continuum of 9 to 12 months where we can slowly stand them on their own 2 feet while giving them every single tool they need every step of the way to help them successfully do that. And we help them do that at their own pace. Like, our program's not one where it's like, you've done 90 days, your 90 days is up, bud, you're going to the next phase. It's like, we only phase guys up if they're ready for that.
Right.
I love how individualized our care is, but we all know that every, bit of outcome studies we've ever seen in this field points to the longer you can keep people engaged in a structured setting over a long course of time, the better outcomes we're going to have, and I'm a big believer in this, that recovery does not happen overnight. It happens over time. And, I can't tell you how many guys, and you guys see this too, that I've worked with doing this work who have just done the revolving door of traditional 28 days of treatment over and over and over again. And maybe when they've done that, they haven't followed through with aftercare recommendations, right? But it's just understanding that 30 days isn't long enough to fully treat the magnitude of the complicated issues that we deal with, and this healing takes a long time, man. And the longer, because that's the thing, right? Is like when we talk about resistance and we talk about guys that are pre-contemplative, like I've seen many that are still kind of struggling with that, even 90 days into our program, right? But when we get them into that second phase or into that third phase and we keep them longer, we see a shift eventually, hopefully, right? That's the hope. And sometimes that shift just doesn't happen right at first. It needs time for that to be able to happen, and that's what I love about having a full continuum and having the capacity to work with guys on a long-term basis. And I think it's so crucial. I
couldn't agree with you more, Jared. I think, we have these conversations with families and with clients all the time. And I think it's true, especially when you're looking at a program like Momentum or some other programs that are based on a longer length of stay. There's kind of that sticker shock, right? It's like, oh my God, you're asking me to go away somewhere for, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And that's a lot for them to digest. But I think, number one, to go back to what you're saying, Jared, I think, number one, like length of time in clinical care, receiving that clinical support is directly correlated with your increasing your chances of successful sobriety. I mean, hands down. And I think you can't argue that point. I mean, I think we see it time and time again. As you said, Jared, I think there's so many people that do these, 28-day, 30-day programs, and they think that it's just a one-time thing. They can go in, I'm going to, commit myself for this month, and then I'm going to come out and I'm not going to follow any recommendations or aftercare, and I'm just fine, right? I'm going to go in, I'm going to, do my time, so to speak, and then I'm just going to be cured, and somehow life is just going to look completely different when I come out. And the reality is that it just does not work that way, right? So I think you got two options. You can either, it's going to take about a year, at least clinically, and it may continue on more of an outpatient basis past that. And obviously utilizing community support, working a personal program of recovery, these things are super important. But if you're not going to a facility where you're going to be there for, 6 months more and slowly step down through those levels of care, then you're going to do it in a disjointed fashion. You're going to do 30 days plus of residential. Then you're going to come out and you're going to do an IOP. Then you're going to step down to an outpatient. Like, you're going to do the same thing. It's just going to be in different settings, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for those people that are willing to do that in a facility like Momentum or places that have that more longer term kind of modality, it's more helpful, because at least if you're going to do that work for that amount of time, at least do it in a place to where the team is going to have continuity. They're going to be able to communicate. There's just going to be more of a seamless transition from one level of care while you're staying supported in that environment, instead of, going to the residential program and then hoping that the residential program team is going to communicate with the IOP. And then when you step down to OP, that the IOP is going to communicate with the therapist that you're going to see. Like, you're rolling a lot of dice in that situation, I think,
100%. I also think of like the cultural element of being a young person specifically in recovery. Like the idea that I could have done 30 days of residential treatment and then returned to a dorm room, you know what I mean? Where there's drug dealers and drinking just everywhere. Like, I'm just not going to I'm just setting myself up for failure in that regard, and kind of winnowing and sorting between who is going through a quote unquote phase like people thought I was and who has a genuine substance use disorder. You just can't tell, and to throw you in that milieu is just, it's just really difficult.
It's difficult. And, again, all of this not to say that maybe some people are successful when they do that, right? Maybe some people, they wake up one day, they're like, hey, I need to make a change. They go to a detox, they go to a 30-day program, they get a therapist afterwards, and
Totally.
and they're sober, right? And they're happy. And that's fine. But I think for the vast majority of people, things just don't work out that right. Like you're saying, like you can't, leave from a potentially like dysfunctional family system where you've been struggling and not been able to maintain sobriety, go be sober for about 30 days and then go right directly back into that family environment or that home environment and then expect that it's going to be okay. Definitely not a dorm room, for sure.
The dorm room. I'm back at the senior house at Alabama.
Yeah, go back to the frats. That's right. Yeah.
In talking about the full continuum and in talking about long-term treatment like we are, especially with young adults, like it brings me to, just the whole theory of like the family's part in that, right? And the part that they play in engaging with us in treatment to continue to keep their loved one with us. You know what I mean? Because you guys see it on the front end all the time. Like the way that guys get to us typically is because parents are putting down some boundaries and utilizing some leverage and, understanding and following our direction when we tell them like, hey, it's not that your son won't be successful or not that they don't want to get better. They just don't know how to rationally make the best decision for what they need right now, and coaching them on how to put those boundaries in place. And the thing is we have that intervention on the front end and we ask these guys for a minimum commitment of 90 days. And then typically what we see is around that 90-day mark, like we have to have that same intervention again, And the hope is that throughout 90 days, we're continuously prepping the family and preparing them for understanding that there is a next step after primary treatment, the importance of that, but also the part that they're going to continue to play in helping them get to that next step. Because families will think, well, they've been there for 90 days, they sound better, they look great, they're eating well, they're saying all the right things, like they're good to come home, and it's continuing to educate them that like, hey, this process is still not over. And in order to get them to the next level of care, we're going to have to probably have a conversation about boundaries again, and that's the family's role, right? In keeping them in treatment for a year. And I think their part is so crucial for their loved one to have a successful outcome,
Do you, Jared, do you guys at Momentum, do you have a family component? Do you work with the families on exactly that, like setting those boundaries, understanding how to kind of what support looks like and how to get their own treatment, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so at Momentum, we have that same belief system and philosophy that if the whole family system is not recovering together, it's going to be really hard for their loved one to have a successful outcome. Like I hear our owner, Rick, say this all the time, when you're asked about success and, rates of success and all that, I hear Rick always mention that like the guys who come to us that engage in our program, that have their families also engage in our program and do the things that we recommend and trust us, and follow our guidance throughout the whole process. Those guys do well, and so how we go about working with the family and engaging the family is all of our families get weekly family therapy on a weekly basis. They also attend a weekly support group that we do via Zoom on Thursdays where they all kind of hop on Zoom and we have one of our master's level therapists facilitate a support group via Zoom. And then a big thing that we do is a 2-day intensive family workshop that we do quarterly, so every 90 days. And families will come in town for that workshop, and day one will be a lot of like psychoeducation around attachment work and kind of what we're trying to accomplish with your loved one, educating them on all of those types of things, right? And then day two, we actually bring the family and their loved one in, and we do family sculpting and psychodrama with the entire family, which is one of the most powerful processes these families, could experience with their loved one. Like we've seen so much powerful stuff happen in those settings during the family program. And, I want to mention it too, like the Cove, right? Our young women's program, we do the same thing with them as well. The same family program, the same family therapy, the same roadmap, which is crucial.
Absolutely. It is crucial. I mean, as you mentioned, I think especially, I think for everyone, but especially that younger adult population, I mean, like the families, if they're not engaged, it's just so much more difficult of a process for the client to be able to find recovery for themselves,
Or how much it's so often the idea that the child is the problem, everyone else is fine. If the kid would only act right, then we would all be in this harmonious kind of correlation without seeing that we're all impacting each other. We're all pushing and pulling in these very specific kind of ways. And it's difficult to give families to have that kind of eye-opening experience that they need to engage in their own kind of step of recovery. I know you guys do the Cove as well. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, Jared, if there are differences between those programs or how it's different for you guys to interact with young women as you interact with young men.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are, like, some differences, right? I know when Gabby had the vision to open the Cove and do the women's program, it was to have a heightened, trauma component to it. However, like, we do trauma work with all of our guys too on a very deep level. But the women's program specifically, a very trauma informed, trauma based program. We have therapists who are certified in EMDR, somatic experiencing, brain spotting, which are all different modalities we work, through trauma with our young men and our young women. And dealing with the young women, we started out initially as an 8-bed program, and we're just serving these women in extended care and sober living. We've not been offering primary treatment for them. What we've done recently is we've actually just now expanded our extended care, and we have more beds for extended care, which is good to know. And so we just moved our young women to a new campus that is similar to the men's setup. And so it backs up to the saltwater marsh. We have brand new townhouses that exist on this campus. They're awesome, really awesome facilities. It's a really unique campus, and we're super excited about that. But as far as the programming goes, everything's the same besides us not having primary yet. For young women, that is hopefully going to be coming soon.
That's great. It's definitely a needed resource for sure. I think, not to get on that whole soapbox, but I think young adult treatment, especially adolescent treatment, which I know you guys don't do. I mean, there's a huge need for that, but there really is a lack of services. I feel just kind of in North Carolina in general for females specifically. I mean, it's great to hear that you guys are offering that and then are going to expand those services.
Yeah, we've just seen a lot of need for it, right? Basically, like when we first opened up the women's extended care, like we got filled up pretty quickly and got on a wait list pretty quickly because there's not a lot of long-term options for young adult women, like we're talking about. And I think options that are gender specific, that are, age specific, that are specialized in that way of working with trauma and co-occurring issues that are long term, you don't see a lot of that, for women for sure. And so, I think those components are crucial.
Absolutely. I love how you guys really address that recovery can't be this monolithic experience, that there are demographic specific experiences that are best addressed within that demographic. And just because it's a more holistic and better treatment. And it's true just in any medical science, a young body isn't going to react the same way as someone who is older, and the mental health operates in the same way. You talked a little bit about Gabby, and I think it's something that we don't talk a lot about. I know we talk a lot about clinical modalities, but I wanted to ask a little bit about how important is it to have, a psychiatric nurse practitioner like really kind of keyed in to your milieu and how psychiatric medication might play a role over someone's continuum of care at Momentum.
Yeah, that's a good question. And she's a psychiatric PA, Ryan.
Oh, I know. She's going to listen. Sorry, Gabby. I'm sorry.
No, but I mean, just to talk about Gabby, not to get in too much of the weeds with medication and stuff, because that's really her, topic that she is so skilled with. But just to talk kind of about her and her skill set, she has a large background in clinical mental health, a very extensive background of substance abuse as well. And what's really dynamic about Gabby is she meets with our guys and our girls weekly, at first, and definitely like does thorough med assessments with them, thorough evaluation kind of with them on the front end, and goes over everything from their childhood up to what led them, into treatment. And what's great about Gabby is she's the center of our she's a big part of our program, right? Like she's there, every single week, Monday through Friday, she's there, and she builds real relationships and rapport with these guys. Not to say that not all psychiatrists don't do that, but, a lot of programs, like you'll ask somebody, hey, like, what was the psychiatrist like there? And they're like, oh, I met him like once or twice, maybe the time that I've been here. Well, Gabby is meeting with them on a consistent basis. And she's a therapist by trade. She's certified in somatic experiencing. So I think what sets her apart is it's not just like the psychiatry medication conversation or topic that she meets with these guys and girls on. Like she builds real relationships with them. She does, even engages in some trauma work with them, because she's also a therapist by trade. So you kind of have like that psychiatric skill set, the therapist skill set mixed into one, and she just builds real rapport and relationships with them. what's interesting is some of our guys, not as much the girls, but some of the guys look at her as like, oh, I can trust her. Like she's an outsider. And she's like, I'm the medical director. And like everything you tell me is going to be communicated to our whole clinical team. But like it just speaks volumes about her ability to build rapport and trust. And yeah, we're very, very fortunate to have her for sure.
Yeah, that's huge, especially for a medical provider. I mean, we are also blessed with Dr. Hong, our medical director. He's very much the same. He's also skilled in therapy, and he will really spend time with patients. And not to say anything negative about doctors in general, but I feel like that is a difficult thing to find in that particular part of the field for sure.
It is.
Yeah.
It definitely is. And she helps so much with medications and different mental health issues that we can work with. She's a major component of, being able to set us apart in some ways and helping us work with various issues,
Yeah.
comes to different dual diagnosis issues and medications.
That's great, man. That's good stuff.
Well, Jared, I think we're coming close to our time here. Is there anything else that you want us to know? Anything you'd like to broadcast about momentum, about yourself?
Man, I mean, no, not that I can think of. I love doing this work, as you guys know. I'm extremely passionate about it. I love working with families on the front end. I love doing the admissions piece, as well, and just kind of diving in the trenches with them. And we've had so much good experiences working with you guys. Like y'all are just phenomenal on the detox and stabilization piece, and so responsive, and just do such a good job in helping us on the front end. And we appreciate you guys for that. And love working with y'all. So,
Jared, let me hit you with this real quick, man. Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
So if you had to say one thing to any potential families or potential clients that are kind of kicking the tires of treatment or looking to stop their use and step into treatment, what would be like one nugget that you'd kind of leave them with?
Man, there's so many, right? I guess the one nugget would be like, as cheesy as this sounds, I guess, is to not lose hope. Like don't give up on them. If there's one thing I really try to help families see is like when they get on the phone with us, they have so much compassion fatigue. You know what I mean? Like they're worn out. They aren't able to view their loved one as a cancer patient anymore that suffers from a chronic progressive disease.
Yeah.
Because the person who has cancer doesn't steal from you, lie to you, manipulate you. You know what I mean? So they develop this compassion fatigue. And when they get on the phone with us, man, they're tapped out. And so the biggest thing we try to accomplish with them is helping them get on this side of compassion and empathy again with them. Because if we can achieve that with families, then like we can move them into action to really want to get them the best help that they need, So yeah.
Amen, brother.
Hit them with.
That's for sure. Well, thank you, Jared.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time, man.
This has been awesome. I'm glad my cat didn't jump on the screen over here.
I'm kind of upset
that it did.
That it did.
Yeah.
Maybe better luck next time, I guess.
Hey, that's right. That's right.